Hey everyone, welcome to your second lecture in Module 1B. And today we're going to be talking about asking good research questions. In the last lecture, we went over considerations and thinking about how you should conceptualize your questions and maybe where you should start initially. And in this one, we're going to talk about the nitty-gritty of what should go into your research question and how you should build it. I first want you guys to think about, beyond this kind of initial premise that I set for you, that you should really pick things and topics that you're interested in. You also should really concretely be couching any of your research questions in the literature. What does this mean? It means you should read a little bit. So say I have an interest in abortion-related policies, then maybe I'll take a look at Google Scholar and look at some abortion related political science and get a sense of where the field is at and what sort of data sets people are using, what sort of questions they're asking, and get an idea of where my work could fit in relative to all of that. I think this is one of the most difficult things to do at the undergraduate level, because at that point, you're still early on in understanding the literature. And so what I would say is this is a bit of a challenge at this point for you, but I do want you guys to think a little bit about the way you would situate yourself with the existing literature. It allows you to be producing research that is novel and kind of fits a gap in the existing literature, and allows you to kind of have a robust understanding of where you should be going in theory and have templates for moving forward with your research because other people have kind of tread this path before you. So you're going to spend a lot of time thinking about the idea and the theory, and you're going to read a little bit. Your research questions should also be based in this idea of causality, right? There should be causal relationships being investigated. This is a part of using the scientific method, right? We need to be asking, does X cause Y, right? So in your research question, there should be a causal mechanism happening. For example, does throwing a ball up cause it to fall back down, right? Our X is throwing the ball up, and Y is if it falls back down, right? And so you want to be investigating a cause and effect relationship. Does throwing the ball up cause it to fall back down? And in this case, we know obviously we're talking about gravity, and gravity does make the ball fall back down. But this is the idea of causality, right? Our setup won't always allow us to directly investigate causality. This is a kind of later issue. We'll be talking about different kinds of data sets and different research environments allow you to investigate causality directly, but our questions should still be causal. And the way that we answer them can vary whether or not we can actually say we found evidence of a causal relationship or not. It depends on the sort of data and research framework we're looking with, but our research questions themselves should be causal. They also need to be operationalizable or able to be actually undertaken. The research questions should be honed in and specific enough that we can actually find mechanisms to measure and understand the relationship. The study's able to be undertaken. We can identify the concepts in the theory within the research question, and then those concepts can then be measured and turned into variables for quantitative research, right? When we're operating in this quantitative paradigm. So we'll talk a little bit about variables and measurement, I think in 1C or 1D, but I do want you guys to be thinking about how those causal mechanisms can be measured and translated into something that's actually able to be undertaken. If your research question is so general and so broad that you can't actually operationalize it or make sense of the concepts, then it's going to be really hard for you to actually undertake the research. So the research question needs to be operationalizable. There's also a level of foresight that goes into building these sort of research questions, right? And so you're sort of gaming the system in a way where the best questions already kind of are being drafted in a way that we know that it will work well to test the theory and it's able to be undertaken, right? So that means that we're thinking ahead about the data sets we might have access to. We're thinking ahead about where it fits in the literature, and we're thinking ahead about what are the kind of operationalizable components that we have access to, our resources and limitations, and we're drafting research questions that we know that we actually can undertake. So what does this look like in the context of some undergraduate work? So say I'm an undergraduate and I have some personal interest in voter indifference. or voters that really don't care or are a little bit apathetic towards politics or voting. We need to find a specific concept that underlies voter indifference, and we need to hone in what's causing that voter indifference in order to draft a research question. So we're going to pick two concepts specifically that we know that we can measure maybe in the context of a specific data set. So I'm going to pick voter knowledge, so how much political knowledge somebody has, and participation, so whether or not they actually go out and vote or not. So we're also going to then need to narrow the scope a little bit as well, right? So looking at all voters over the history of American politics is a little bit too unwieldy. Instead, what we'll do is maybe look in at a particular state or a specific year of presidential election in order to kind of hone in what we're working on. And then in addition to that, we're going to think about this paradigm of foresight, which allows me to kind of hone in and maybe pick a specific presidential cycle that I know I have data on. So we're honing in a way that we know we have some ability to operationalize. So then from all of this, I would create a research question that has a causal link that's honed in on a specific time that I know I can operationalize data-wise, and then kind of create. So my research question that I came up in this context is, how did voter knowledge affect voting behavior in the 2016 presidential election? And I think voting behavior can be even more specific on, or we could say like whether or not somebody turned out to vote, whether or not they actually showed up at the polls. So our X, or we'll talk about this later, our independent variable, what's causing voting is voter knowledge, right? Political knowledge. We measure political knowledge through a set of battery of questions in our major election studies. And so I know I have data on that in 2016. And then in those same data sets, I know I also have access to somebody's self-reported voting behavior, right? Whether or not they actually showed up at the polls or not. So my voting, I think that voter knowledge is causing voter behavior. So I've incorporated that into the research question. I know I have a data set on the 2016 presidential election, so I'm going to specify that. So I know that my research question both has causal elements, it's operationalizable, and has the foresight to be specific enough that I can operationalize it. In addition to that, I've already done some research and I have a lot of knowledge on voter behavior broadly. So I know that this question would be fruitful to the broader academic literature on voting behavior and political knowledge. So that's kind of how you fit all of these components into the broader research process and how to build your research questions. I also want you to think about how the research question builds around theory, right? So connecting multiple research questions and evidence from these various studies then helps us begin to build and solidify theory. So that's how it then wraps back around to the broader research process. So I want you guys to think about how your research questions can contribute to a broader scientific theory or set of theories.